I know that many of you have had the opportunity to hear him before, and I know the ones of you that have not gotten to hear him yet, I know that you are going to be blessed by him. Hector is a very unique spirit, and we're very excited to have him here, and I'm glad that you were able to get in. And Susie, absolutely. Yeah, we've never had Susie join us before, so we really appreciate Susie being here as well. So.
See, you must have gotten Hector all shook up since he forgot his.
That's right. He forgot where he was coming.
So
turn it over to you guys.
I have a picture here. I can just pass this around. It's a picture of our daughter, Patricia. And I should explain a bit about how we met her. Back in the 60s, during the civil rights movement, we felt we wanted to be a part of it in whatever way we could be. And so we moved to Atlanta because it was the headquarters of all the different organizations. And we got a job with the Quakers. I'm a Quaker. And we got a job with the Quakers, a tutoring program in a very poor black neighborhood of Atlanta called Vine City. I didn't want to have a 9-to-5 job. That's what I was offered. You know, I could rent an apartment somewhere in town and just go into the neighborhood during the day for my work and then go home at night. I didn't want to do that. I thought the only way I could really understand what was happening to these children and their parents was to live in the neighborhood. And I remember there were some funny things happened. You know, I was walking around and in the neighborhood, and I'd ask somebody if she knew of any houses for rent, and she said, "Ain't you on the wrong side of town, honey?" And I said, "No, I want to live here. I have a job over here." And they found me a house, and we rented it and moved in, and we had our 3 children, 3 girls. The oldest, 8, maybe?
Yeah.
Something like that. Or 9, I guess she might, no, not 8. 8 is
8,
about
Tricia
right.
was
Yeah.
9.
And right behind us, there was a mother with 2 girls about the ages of ours. And she was an alcoholic. She was really a nice person, but she just didn't have control over her drinking. And she'd blow the rent money from time to time, and the kids would stay with us until their mama found a new apartment. Well, these 2 girls got to be really a part of our family pretty quickly. And when it came time for us to leave, why, they asked if they could come with us. We were going up to Pennsylvania for a year. We'd been there 2.5 years. And I felt like I was batting my head against a brick wall trying to change anything there. We did stuff, I mean, kind of wild stuff in a way when you think about it now. We blocked off the main street through the neighborhood, the bus route and everything, because there's no place for the children to play. And we thought, okay, we'll make it safe for the children. We'll block off the street, no traffic. And the kids all were playing out in the street and having a great old time. But the city didn't appreciate it very much. The police came by and, you know, with their cameras and all that sort of stuff. It was for me, it was a wonderful experience because I came to understand a whole lot of things which I, in my privileged life, had really never understood. And also, we got to know and love very many people in that neighborhood. I asked their mother if they could come with us, and she agreed and signed a paper letting me take the 2 children. And we got up to Pennsylvania, and Susie got sick and had to have knee operations and hip operation. And I was there with 5 little girls and trying to visit the hospital, and it was just too much, so I took Patricia and her sister Priscilla, we called her Seal and Trish, and we took those 2 back to Atlanta to their mama, and we took our kids to the grandparents. And then we moved back to Georgia. We really did enjoy living in the South. And we got a farm outside of Atlanta, and they asked again if they could come live with us. And their mama would only let Patricia live with us. Seal was her favorite daughter, and she just wouldn't let her go. So Patricia, pretty early on, became really an integral part of our family. I mean, Susie needed help, and our daughters all helped her with different things. And Patricia was right in there with them, taking care of Susie. She went to high school, did a beautiful mural on the wall of the high school. She was very artistic. And then she went on to college. She's the first of our kids in college. And she finally graduated from Fisk here in Nashville with highest honors. And we were so proud of her, of what she had become, because you can see she was a beautiful woman, but she was also had a beautiful soul. And there were a lot of things we especially loved about her, and one that really touched me always was that she never turned her back on her mama. She always went to see her mama and tried to find her sometimes when she couldn't, or her sister, same thing. Her sister got into drugs and alcohol, and sometimes she couldn't find her at all. After Trish was killed, we found she was killed in November, and she had a present from the previous Christmas because she hadn't been able to find her sister anywhere. Well, Valerie and Verna were talking about how these things affect a person, and absolutely right. You never can forget. I don't know whether it's because it was the act of another human being that took away somebody you love very much that makes it so hard. You know, we've had to deal with death before, but this was something different, because it was just the willful act of another human being, and to take away the life of this daughter that we loved. What happened was he was a crack addict, and he was just walking along in her neighborhood. She had bought a house, first person in her family to ever own a house, first person to graduate with a degree. She got a master's degree. She was the best educator of all our kids. She got a master's degree in library science and went to work in the Atlanta Public Library, working with kids like herself who had problems with reading and things like that. Well, this crack addict was walking down the street and saw a house with no lights on. So he thought that's what he was doing. He was breaking and entering, stealing stuff for his habit and carrying it off to the crack house. So he broke in the back window and took some stuff and got his first hit of crack. And he was walking through the neighborhood again a little later, and there was still no light on. And he said he was a heavy user. He wanted another hit, and so he broke in again and started gathering up some more stuff. And that's when Tricia came home from work. It was after dark, quite dark. He hid in a closet, hoping that he could get away and get out the back window. And she opened the closet door, and she fell backwards, and he tied her hands behind her back. This man's name was Ivan Simpson, and everything he told me about what happened sounded exactly the way Tricia would have behaved in this situation. She told him he needed to get help with his drug habit. She told him where there was food in the refrigerator. And he told her to put burglar bars on the window and to always leave a light on, because the reason why he broke in was because the house was dark. He figured nobody was there. he asked her about, she had these sewing dummies, the kind of place where she was great. She made a lot of her own clothes, just had a beautiful sense of color and style and everything. She made bridal gowns as a side source of income to her work in the library. So she had these things that you hang the dresses on and as you're making them. And he asked her what those were, and she explained that a woman named Susie had taught her how to sew. And he said where he would park the car so she could get in the morning, he expected her to untie her hands and be free. So he went with her car and this stuff, and he got a big hit of crack, over $100. I don't know how much that is, but it was evidently enough to put him out of control. He was driving by and saw there was still no light on, and so he decided, well, he sort of says he was arguing with his demon about whether he should have sex with her or not. And he evidently decided yes, and so he broke in again through the back window, and she said, "You'll have to kill me first." And that's what he did. He strangled her. It took us a long time. Yeah, I guess, a long time. I'm still not over it. You can see that. I mean, I just can't ever think of it. I thought he couldn't have been a human being. He must have been a monster, because human beings don't treat each other that way. And I was angry. I wanted him to hurt. And I wanted to get even somehow for what he'd done. And I had, as Valerie was saying, I have dreams sometimes saying stop, somehow as though I could stop him from doing what he was doing. After a while, I wondered, because I've always believed, I've never been in favor of the death penalty, because I don't think violence should be answered with violence. And Dr. King's attitude meant a great deal to me, in many, many ways. But I think the idea of not returning violence for violence, but returning love for violence, loving your enemies. You read it. It's there in the New Testament, and it's in Buddhism, and it's all over in religions, but it doesn't happen very often. But I wanted to know who the man was. What had happened to him that made it possible for him to do what he did? And we went to the DA in Atlanta, and when we said we weren't in favor of the death penalty, he was pretty angry. This was a guy off the streets, no powerful friends, no money, no nothing. So he was an easy mark. Get tough on crime, and here's an easy one to get. So he said I said I wanted to learn about him, to know who he was, what had happened to him. And the DA said, if you have any contact with his family or his lawyers, we'll consider you for the defense. We'll give you no more information about the case. Well, we didn't want that to happen, but we decided, being a stubborn guy, and especially when I think I have a right to get some information, and somebody said, no, you can't. I mean, after all, this was a man who killed my daughter. I have a right to know something about him. And so we found friends who worked in the death penalty area, and they got some information about Ivan Simpson and found out that he was born in a mental hospital, and that when he was 8 years old, his mama took him and his brother and his little sister to a swimming pool and said God was telling her to destroy them. And he and his brothers got away, but he stood there while she drowned his little sister in front of his eyes. And he wrote me that he was relieved because she wouldn't be tormented any longer. So that's when I started thinking, recognizing that there was another human being here, that this wasn't a monster. This was another human being who had suffered as a child, and things happened to him that should never happen to any child, ever. And of course, being poor, there was no help. There was nobody to help this child come to terms with what had happened. Nobody to help him deal with seeing his mother try to drown him, and then drown his sister. He started on crack when he was about 20. He tried suicide, I think, 3 times. The last time they put him in a mental hospital for observation. He quit crack, and then he went back again. And that is one thing I wanted to speak about too, is this crack, because he had never killed anybody in his life before. And that man is tormented. He's in hell because of what he did under the influence of this crack. And so to satisfy this habit of his, he's tormented. He's got a burden that he will never, ever get rid of. And I'd say stay away from that stuff. Stay away from it. And the only way to stop violence, to my way of thinking, is to say it stops here with me. I will not return. And I think about, prisons. And I think, your bodies are in prison, all of you. But your soul isn't. Your attitude isn't in prison. That's up to you. That's up to you to decide whether you're going to, get angry, let anger rule, resentment, little things. I know you're packed in together. It's not, and it's hard. I mean, I'm not talking about something that's easy. How hard. I can't imagine how hard. Well, I was in the Army, so I knew a little bit about being packed together with people that you had really nothing much in common with, and the little things rub you the wrong way, and you get irritated. But I just feel as though the key to change is in every one of us. The key that'll let you out of the prison of resentment and anger and hatred. You've got that key. The key to change. Now I know, and again, I feel like I apologize because, I go home from here to my house, beautiful, quiet little valley where I live, and I'm a farmer, I grow blueberries and stuff. And you're here. And I really have to tell you, I feel bad. I don't know what to do about it, but I really feel bad because I say these things to you, which are hard things to do. But I say them because I don't know that there's any other way. And I realize there may be things that happen to you that never happened to me that make you angry. But I just don't know any way through except talking. Talking helps. Talk to one another. Listen to one another. I mean, really share your troubles with somebody you trust and get it out so you look at it. It's a big help. I know it's helped me an enormous amount to talk about what happened to my daughter and other things in my life, you know, that really were deep back in here, just sitting and doing me no good in the world. Yes, we had a hearing in Atlanta. It was the final hearing on Ivan Simpson's trial. He was going to be sentenced there. And a friend of ours suggested we write a letter to the judge telling him how much Patricia meant to us and telling him why we didn't want the death penalty. So I wrote 2 pages and sent it to my friend, and he said, "No, Hector, it's not enough. It's got to be like one of the epistles." So I tried again, and he passed my second one. I sent it on to the judge. And when we got into the courtroom, there was a man in prison uniform, sitting in the jury box. They were hearing a little marijuana trial of some kind, and I wondered if that was Ivan Simpson. And he was kind of hunched over, and then he looked out at us in the courtroom. I didn't want to look at him. I didn't want to meet his eyes. I turned away. And then the trial began, and he moved over to the place in front of the judge where he listens to all the charges against him, and he pled guilty to everything. And I'm very deaf, and that was one time I was glad. I just held Susie's hand and cried, because just hearing even the little bits of what happened to Tricia it's just awful. But at the end, the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then he asked if any of us had something to say, people who had been affected by the crime victims. And Tricia's cousin got up with her twin sister, kind of holding her up, and she was crying, and she said, "I hate you, Ivan Simpson. I hate you because you took away this Tricia that I loved so much. I hate you because you're going to see the dawn, and she's never going to see the morning again. And I hate you because my tax money is going to pay for feeding you." And she went to sit down, and then they called on me, and I had prepared something that I read, and I basically said how much Patricia meant to us. Our youngest daughter she said she can't remember life without Patricia. She was there, she was 5 years old when Patricia joined our family. And the two of them were especially close. Well, it came when I was speaking, I said how much she meant to us, and then I said, "I don't hate you, Ivan Christopher Simpson, but I hate with all my soul what you did to my daughter." And then it was like 2 hands were put. He was standing over here, and I wasn't looking at him at all. It was like I just turned around. It was almost like I was turned around to face him. And I looked into his eyes, and the tears were streaming down his cheeks. And I said, I wish for all of us who have been so wounded by this crime, and I wish this for you also, Ivan Simpson. I wish that we might all find God's peace. And they're going to lead him away to his life, knowing he was going to die in prison. And he came to the microphone, asked if he could speak. And again, with the tears streaming down his cheeks, he said, I'm so sorry for the pain that I've caused. I'm so sorry for the pain I've caused. That night, I got to my room. I couldn't sleep. And I realized, he could have said, to hell with you all. My life is over. I'm going to die in that damn jail. But he didn't. He went up to the microphone and he said those words, and I just felt like a big burden was off my back. And I wrote to him that I'd forgiven him for what he had done. And I think in recognizing his humanity, I rediscovered my own. Now, I talk about, if I was working with a tutoring program, trying to help children with their studies and all. But in some of these apartments and buildings, they were falling apart. There was no place to even put a book. And this particular building was about the worst I'd ever seen. It was in January. It was one of the coldest Januaries in Atlanta history, and pipes had been freezing in different places, and it's just terrible. This one building had real high ceilings, 4 rooms on each floor, 2 floors, and public toilets at the end, and each room had a family, a whole family. There was a little stove that burned wood or coal, and it put out enough soot to make all these rooms dark. It was just all black and gray all around. And to walk into one of these rooms and see a family just huddled around the stove trying to keep warm. Well, I wanted to start a rent strike. And so I was going back into the building to try to talk to the tenants to get them to start a strike. And the man who owned the building, who drove around in a green Cadillac collecting his rents, he saw me and he knew me. And so he called the police, and the policeman came and said, if you take one step into that building, I'll arrest you for trespassing. So I quickly ran and called a friend of mine and told him what was happening, and went back, and I told the policeman, stay right here. So I came back over and I stepped up, and they carted me off, and what did he call one of these guys that was had me with the handcuffs, call me a damn Yankee troublemaker. And they got me into prison and carted me off. I just spent the night there, and then in the course of this, Dr. King, they knew, I knew his wife reasonably well. I used to go over there to visit quite often. I didn't know him because he was gone so much. But they heard about it, and they brought dinner over for Susie and the kids that night when I was in jail.
Mrs. King brought dinner to our house.
Yeah. And then they picketed the next day for my release in front of this awful building. We had a neighborhood organization of just people in our neighborhood trying to fight for better living conditions and everything, playgrounds and better housing, stuff like that. And they all were over there picketing with signs and everything. And there's a picture of Dr. King and his wife picketing there with them. And that was one of the biggest honors of my life, was to have him picketing to free me from jail. That's something else.